guys, my name is Tyler or Yams from PC Flipping Central, and today we're going to go over 5 things you should not buy as a PC flipper and 3 things that you should be very careful of and might try to avoid. We've been getting a lot of new PC flippers with the growth of our channel that are really just getting into PC flipping or don't have a lot of experience. So this video is kind of geared towards them to show what you shouldn't buy, because I'm seeing a lot of newbies get questionable parts in their computers. So this is just a little informational for you guys, and yeah, let's get right into it. So first thing that I would steer completely clear of as a PC flipper, except maybe in some very, very specific situations, is the NVIDIA 900 series. So GTX 950, 960, and so on. And then the AMD R9 series and anything older than that. And the reason for this is because the AMD R9 series and the GTX 900 series have all lost driver support, meaning they aren't getting driver updates from NVIDIA or AMD, and they really are just old. Hey guys, real quick, the GTX 900 series is actually still supported by NVIDIA. It might lose driver support soon, so the main thing I'll be talking about with that is just age. I misspoke in this video, but the AMD R9 series does not have driver support, so this will all apply to that. These cards were released 10 years ago or even earlier, so they really are very old, and I've had experiences where I'm buying 900 series graphics cards or AMD R9 series graphics cards where they're just gonna break sooner, they're more likely to have faulty fans, they're more likely to just break down a lot sooner than any of the newer cards. And honestly, like maybe 1 or 2 years ago, the GTX 970 was like the GOAT. It was an awesome budget card. You could get it for $30, $40, that sort of thing. Nowadays they're hovering around, let's say $30, and at that point it's just a lot better value to get an AMD RX 570 or something like that for a very similar price. And then for example too, like the GTX 980, since they were the flagship of the 900 series, they're still going for more money than I would like to pay. Think around $60 for a 980 nowadays, or even around $70 for a 980 Ti. When that card is 10 years old and you can just get like a GTX 1660 Super for a very similar price, if not cheaper, and it will perform almost the same or better while being so much newer and having so much more support, being way more optimized in games and just working way better for newer games. Okay, second thing that you should steer pretty much completely clear of nowadays is CPUs that have 4 cores and 4 threads. So if they're 4-core, 8-thread, meaning they're multi-threaded, you could do those, but nowadays I've noticed that games are having a tough time, especially the newer ones, running on 4-core, 4-thread CPUs. Think of maybe like Fortnite. I've seen so many benchmarks where even a CPU that is multi-threaded or that 6-core, 6-thread will perform so much better than a 4-core, 4-thread, mainly because it's not stuttering. A lot of games will have just such a hard time running on 4-thread CPUs. They'll stutter a bunch and it's just really not a good experience. I've had a lot of times where I've sold a build even with an i5 6500, something like that, which isn't that bad, but in games it'll stutter a lot, and I'll have customers reach out to me after getting the computer and they'll say something like, you know, my game is just stuttering so much. Obviously it depends on the game, but as a general idea, you should steer clear from them. And even think of the Intel Core i3-9100. I would consider it more of a newer CPU. I guess now it's like 5 or 6 years old. But even though it has great single core performance, the fact that it only has 4 threads means that it will stutter in a lot of games and it won't perform nearly as well as even something a little older, maybe an i5-8500 that has not as good of single core performance, but since it has those extra cores, those extra threads, it will perform a lot better in games. And especially newer games too are just taking a lot bigger advantage of more cores, since when Ryzen came out, they made it very normal to have a lot of cores in your processors. So games are adapting to that and have been for a while. Okay, third thing I would steer completely clear of, and I would never do this in any of my builds, is using a mechanical hard drive as your boot drive. SSDs are so cheap and they're so fast that it's really a no-brainer to just have an SSD in your build. Even if you just have a really small 120 gig SSD or 250 gig SSD as your boot drive, and then use a hard drive as a secondary, that's a little better. But when you compare the time it takes even to boot up Windows on a hard drive versus an SSD, it's really a no-brainer. Why would you not get an SSD? You can get used 250 gig SSDs for like $10. It's unbelievable that I've seen people use mechanical hard drives as their boot drives in builds. If I bought a computer from someone on Facebook Marketplace that had a mechanical hard drive as a boot drive, I would be so unbelievably unhappy with my purchase. And I think a lot of you new PC flippers should really focus on getting good reviews and having good customer service, because that'll make more people want to buy from you, and you'll be able to get referrals too. And when you have a hard drive as your boot drive, it's not going to be a good experience for the buyer, so stay completely away from this. Hard drives as secondaries can be okay, but as boot drives, it's an absolute no-go. If I see any of you guys in our Discord using a mechanical hard drive as a boot drive and a flip, I'm banning you. Okay, fourth thing you should stay away from, and actually this one's not as cut and dry as a lot of other things, a lot of people don't know this, is old power supplies or bad power supplies. I've seen people post builds for sale that are very high end. They have like a 3070 in them or something, and they're using a Thermaltake Smart as their power supply, which if you don't know is not a very good unit. Or I've seen people as well that will buy used power supplies where they were all right back in the day, but now that power supply is 10 years old. And power supplies will have a tendency to break down over time. Their capacitors will fail or something like that. And so those two things, you never want to get a bad power supply and you never want to get an old power supply. When a power supply fails, especially if it's a very low end one, it can be kind of fatal for your computer. It has the chance to take down another part with it or even be a little violent. So I'm going to link our Discord down in the description. We have a member in there named Sir Providence Law. He recently made a power supply tier list. If you guys are not very new to PC flipping, if you guys have been flipping for a while, you probably know about the Linus Tech Tips PSU tier list, but this guy just made kind of a newer one. The LGT one is a little bit outdated, and he's a very smart guy. So join our Discord. It's pinned in general chat and some of the other PC flipping chats. You can go in there and see if your power supply is good or not. He has the whole tiering methodology in there. He has what the ranks mean, and etc. It's a really, really great resource, and too many people are using bad power supplies in their builds that they shouldn't be. Okay, fifth and final thing you should completely avoid in your PC flips is gonna be bad coolers. This one is also not very straightforward, but even I have fallen for this one more times than I'd like to admit. Sometimes you'll go on Amazon or you'll go on AliExpress and you'll see a cooler like this one or something else that will look like it could cool, a decently powered CPU pretty well. And even their TDP or their advertisement for how much they can cool will say 95 watts or something. But in reality, it actually can't cool that. Take, for example, this Cooler Master i30. This is advertised to be able to cool 65 watts of CPU power, but I put this on an i5 8600, which is a 65 watt TDP CPU, and it was thermal throttling within a minute or two of running Cinebench. When you're buying a cooler, definitely look at the reviews. You can ask in our Discord server if it's a good cooler, but a lot of these, especially on the lower end, are super, super misleading and can't cool nearly as well as they're advertised. This i30 literally gets beat by an Intel stock cooler, and the Intel stock cooler is terrible, but at least it outperforms this thing, right? So just be very, very careful and be very conscious about what you're buying. Usually when you're at the very low end of buying CPU coolers, like less than $13, you're gonna get a lot of these things, so be very careful. But you can always step up, spend $2 extra and get one of those 92mm ID cooling tower coolers. I'll put a picture up on screen. These are a very safe bet if you don't want to take a risk of having a cooler that can't potentially cool your CPU. Okay, moving on. There's gonna be 3 things that you can use in PC flips, but nowadays I'm avoiding them a little bit, or I'm using them in specific cases where I'm being very careful of what builds I put these in because they're a little touchy. First of these things is going to be anything older than 8th gen Intel or the 1000 Ryzen series. And I'm sure you guys know this, but Windows 10 is losing support in October of this year, which is coming up really fast. It's already the end of February at the time of this video. And buyers, like I said, you want them to be happy. And all of my builds ever since about a year and a half ago, I've put Windows 11 on. With these older CPUs, first of all, if they're older than that 8th gen Intel, they will not have TPM built in, and TPM is a requirement for Windows 11. Furthermore, anything older than Ryzen 2000 series or Intel 8th gen is not officially supported by Windows 11. Now, I actually haven't had very much trouble using these CPUs in Windows 11. The thing that I've had trouble with is that TPM. So since these CPUs don't support TPM officially, or if they do, it's going to be an add-on on your motherboard, it's tough to install Windows on them. And a lot of games nowadays actually use TPM for their anti-cheat. Think of Valorant, for example, and I even think Marvel Rivals uses it. If you don't have TPM on your computer, the anti-cheat for these games won't work, and therefore you can't play them. And these games are super popular And if your computer that you're selling can't play these games, your buyer is either going to be very unhappy when they receive it, or they're not going to want to buy it in the first place. You can always technically bypass these requirements for TPM, secure boot, CPU, anything like that, or whatever you need when you install Windows 11, but you'll still get these issues later on, and there's even a chance that Windows 11 won't allow you to do Windows updates when you bypass these checks upon installation. So just be very careful. Okay, number 2, talked about this a little earlier, but hard drives as secondary drives. Now, hard drives are really cheap and they provide a lot of storage, but they are really slow. And with how big games are getting, with how much they're loading in every time you boot them up, even though these secondary hard drives are nice for being so cheap and they can add a lot of storage into builds, they are just getting a little slow nowadays, and SSDs are so cheap that it's very hard to justify getting a secondary hard drive. Furthermore, this is something that a lot of people don't really think about, and it's that their customers aren't going to know how to use a secondary hard drive. When you have 2 different drives in a computer, let's say you have an SSD as your boot drive and a hard drive as your secondary drive, most people that are buying your computer actually won't know how to save games or any files onto them. It's really funny, on my builds that have 2 drives in them, I'll actually put a document on their desktop that shows them how to use the secondary drive, but probably 50% of the time or more, I'll have someone contact me after buying the build saying that they're out of storage and they're wondering how to get more. And it's just funny because I say, you have a whole extra terabyte on a secondary hard drive that you're not using. I'll even say, I put a document on your desktop showing you how to use it. And then they'll be like, oh, okay, I'll try it. And even then they sometimes have a tough time doing it. So secondary hard drives can kind of just be a pain. I know they're cheap, but I only use them in my lowest end builds, ones that I'm selling for maybe max $500. Okay, third and final thing that you need to be careful of when you're a PC flipper is cases that have static RGB fans or that aren't addressable RGB compatible. A lot of the times as a PC flipper, you're gonna be buying computer cases that have fans pre-installed. A lot of cases will say that they have RGB fans, when in reality they're just rainbow and can't be changed from rainbow. Furthermore, a lot of cases will say that they're RGB and they really are addressable RGB, meaning you can change the color on them, but they have proprietary connections. So they don't have the standard 3-pin 5-volt ARGB connector, and there's something random proprietary that either you can't hook up other fans to or you can't plug into your motherboard, and it's really just a hassle. So static RGB fans or proprietary fans can be fine. They're just very annoying if you don't know that that's what you're getting. There have been a lot of times where I'll buy a case that has pre-included fans, looks like they're ARGB, I'll get the case in the mail, and I'm trying to add maybe an extra cooler into the build. Maybe my CPU cooler is addressable RGB, and I go to connect it to my fans and they're proprietary. So I can't hook them up and they won't be synced when the customer tries to change the lights. Or they're static and I can't hook them up at all. So these ones are really something that you kind of have to know by experience. For example, a lot of Gambias cases are addressable RGB, but they have proprietary fan connections. Sometimes you can plug them into your motherboard, but even then I've had trouble with compatibility issues. A lot of DIY PC cases are static RGB, even though some of them are addressable RGB with standard connections. So it's really just something that you have to be able to look for. You can join our Discord and ask if you're looking to buy a case. A lot of SAMA cases are ARGB and they are normal, and they even have included fan hubs or ARGB hubs, which is really nice. So it's just something you have to look out for, something that really just comes with time, and something that you have to be very conscious about because it's very annoying when you miss it. Anyways, that's everything for this video. I hope you guys found it helpful, especially you new PC flippers. I hope this is going to be kind of a kickboard. Is that the word for it? Kind of a step up? I don't know. Just a great resource for you guys to help when you're starting PC flipping. If you have any other questions, our Discord is going to be linked in the description. We have a lot of smart people, a lot of like-minded people, a lot of other PC flippers that are very happy to help you with any of your questions. And as always, if you like this video, sure to leave a like, leave a comment. It's good for the algorithm. And if you want to see more PC flipping related content, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Once again, my name is Tyler, and I'll see you guys in the next video.